Stefan finally died. It was a blessing, really. He's been in so much pain since Haven. He was out of his mind at the end. He smiled, said he smelled his mother's turnip stew, and slipped away.
I understand if resources cannot be spared to help search for the missing Seekers, Inquisitor. Still, it could involve a threat we are unaware of. There may be a use in looking.
Do you have any advice for me?
Tell that demon, what does it call itself? Cole. Tell it to leave. He may not mean harm, but that does not mean he will not harm us. Spirits are not creatures to take at face value. Be cautious with him, Inquisitor.
That's enough for now.
Another time, then.
Thank you.
I suppose you're right.
Your worship?
I wanted to talk about you, if that's all right.
You know, I'm from Tevinter. Wasn't a slave, but even citizens have it rough if they're not mages. I was a soldier, but women joined the ranks under a different program. When they found out I was passing, it got ugly. I ran, at ball near the border, and ended up here. Not a life I'd wish on everyone, but it'll do.
You said you left Tevinter when they discovered your secret.
Women are allowed to serve, but only in certain ranks and disciplines. I was up for promotion, but the healer I'd bribed to sign off on my physical had to tend to a sick magister. When the replacement healer saw what was or wasn't in my paths, he made threats. It was slavery or death, so I knocked him out and ran.
It's against the law to pass as a man.
It's a crime to lie on an imperial application for service. Would have been a heavy fine or slavery. For 10 silvers, the healer said he'd tell the Tribune I was sick in the head. Some pity for the mad little girl. That was when I hit him. I'd served for a few years. I was good at hitting.
I'm surprised you escaped from the Tevinter Imperium so easily.
It's not like I lived in Minrathous. I was in Trevis, not far from the Navarran border. It helped that I was being chased as a deserter, not a runaway slave. Slave hunters only get paid for what they catch. They're efficient bastards.
What's Tevinter like for a citizen? Someone who isn't a slave or a mage?
I'm of the Separati, citizens who aren't mages. Mages are in charge and everyone knows it. But a wealthy merchant can have an easy life. At the low end, people just try to stay out of slavery. My father was a tailor. I joined the army after the Imperial slaves drove him under.
How did slaves drive your family out of business?
My father made shirts, aprons, that kind of thing. Nothing fancy. One of the magisters had a pet project to prevent the poor from dying of cold in the winter. Nice, right? You get Imperial slaves making simple peasant clothes and selling them for almost nothing. That magister's nice idea put out slave-made clothes at prices my father couldn't match.
It's difficult to compete with someone who doesn't get paid.
That's Tevinter. My father sold himself into slavery. He's one of the Servus Publicus, the Imperium-owned slaves now.
We'll talk later.
Come on, Krem. I'm working my ass off trying to get you to see that move.
You still got plenty of arse left, Chief. Your worship.
Glad you came by. I got a letter from my contacts in the Ben Hasrath. Already verified it with Red.
You want to discuss this alone?
Not like I was hiding it from my boys. Besides, right now, I need to hit something.
You know they've got training dummies, Chief.
The training dummy might actually defend itself against the shield bash. Anyway, the Ben Hasrath letter.
I was under the impression that you were just sending reports.
Yeah, so was I. The Ben Hasrath have been reading my reports. They don't like Corypheus or his Venatori. And they really don't like Red Lyrium. They're ready to work with us. With you, boss. The Qunari and the Inquisition, joining forces.
That would be an unprecedented offer, if I believed it was legitimate, which I don't.
Now, ordinarily that would be the way to go, but they've identified themselves. They're not running a game on you. They found a massive Red Lyrium shipping operation out on the coast.
They wanted us to hit it together. Talked about bringing in one of their dreadnoughts. Always wanted to see one of those big warships in action.
Did you see that? Go get some water. They're worried about tipping the smugglers, so no army. My chargers, you, maybe some backup.
What does this alliance really get us?
They wouldn't use the word alliance if they didn't mean it. Naval power. More Ben Hasrath reports. Qunari soldiers pointed at the Venatori. It could do a lot of good.
You don't seem entirely happy about this.
No, I'm good. It's... I'm used to them being over there. It's been a while.
I thought Qunari wanted to extend their reach to the whole world.
Yeah. Just didn't think I'd see it. Look, the Qun answers a lot of questions. It's a good life for a lot of people. But it's a big change, and a lot of folks here wouldn't do so well under that kind of life. I guess it's not like we're converting. This is just us joining forces against Corypheus. On that front, I think we're good.
I think the Inquisition could use some help from the Qunari.
Good. I'll pass on word to Cullen and Red. We can set up the meeting whenever you're ready.
Yes, sir.
We don't need those chargers. We soldiers are
Would that I
Of course.
But she was so fast and quick with her bow. No one quite knew where she came.
So we're attacking wardens now. That's
Quite the
pissing
quietest.
great.
Her attacks are loud and they're joyful, but she knew the ways of nobler men.
Are things playing out the way you expected?
Cassandra laid it out, right? You're the big hat now. Gonna make everything the way it should be. The praying's nice, I suppose. Corypheus bit, though. Hype.
Corypheus.
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 Sack Splash. I know his name. Doesn't deserve the respect of me saying it, does he?
What do you think about the people who have gathered?
Which, the ones who do things or the ones who give orders?
What do you think about our spy master, ambassador, and commander?
Liliana is pretty in places. Swear I've seen her too. Or heard she used to play. But that'd be mad. Now Josephine, she's as good at humbling her kind as I am. Just with less mess. Knows her business, if you have to have it. And Cullen, I suppose if you want a jackboot, you get a big one so you can grow into it. Nice hair though.
What about Solus?
Solus? His head's crammed up 1,000 years ago.
Thoughts about Cassandra?
Not as buttoned up as she plays, right? Tough though. I'd stand behind her in front of anything.
Anything to say about Varric?
Varric? Too clever. Always saying something, but never saying it straight.
Thoughts on Iron Bull?
He makes me wonder about things. I mean, what did their women look like? What?
thoughts about Warden Blackwall?
He's too good, right? Like to see him out of that uniform. Not like that.
What about Dorian?
He's fun. Could lose a bit more to Vinter.
What about Cole?
I'm not saying nothing about that. That thing is just wrong.
What's your opinion of Vivienne?
She's a bitch, but she knows. She better.
We'll talk later.
Good, right? I'll be here.
To speak and set us all free.
And how much did you need? Good day.
Something
Welcome
like
back.
that, you know.
Nightingales
The left hand remembers a knife slipped to her in the darkness and wonders why the flower blooms.
even master spot. Can they find the key that
I'd like to talk with you about the Inquisition.
I don't understand it. People talk like it's a person, but it's not even a thing. A dagger can be a way to let pain out, but even if it isn't, it's still a dagger. The Inquisition isn't real unless it has something real to make it. It's like a spirit.
I'll talk to you later.
Yes.
Our heroes rode the winding road, defiant of the vile, uncertain for home and call when.
First the Templars, now the Grey Wardens. Both devoted their lives to fighting evil. Now they serve it.
We brought most of the Templars over.
I thank the Maker for that, even if we were too late for some. The Inquisition must serve as an example. We must stand where others fall.
I'd like to know more about the Templars.
What would you like to know?
Why did you join the Order?
I could think of no better calling than to protect those in need. I used to beg the Templars at our local chantry to teach me. At first, they merely humored me, but I must have shown promise, or at least a willingness to learn. The Knight Captain spoke to my parents on my behalf. They agreed to send me for training. I was 13 when I left home.
13. That's still so young.
I wasn't the youngest there. Some children are promised to the Order at infancy. Still, I didn't take on full responsibilities until I was 18. The Order sees you trained and educated first.
What about your family? Did you miss them?
Of course, but there were many my age who felt the same. We learned to look out for one another.
Do the Templars do anything besides hunt mages?
Templars protect against the dangers of magic. Before the Order left the Chantry, that meant serving in a circle. They were also tasked with tracking apostates, or fighting demons inevitably summoned by the weak or malicious.
What do you think of mages? Are they all a threat?
I've seen the suffering magic can inflict. I've treated mages with distrust because of it, at times without cause. That was unworthy of me. I will try not to do so here. Not that I want mages moving through our base completely unchecked. We need safeguards in place to protect people, including mages, from possession at the least.
You've lived in the Circle. What was a typical day for a Templar there?
Typical. The last time I was in a circle was right before it fell apart. Nothing was typical.
Before that, then?
Certain rituals require a full guard. A mage's harrowing, for instance. I've attended a few. Most of the time, you merely maintain a presence, on patrol or in the circle, ready to respond if needed. Mages pretend to ignore that presence, but they're watching you just as closely.
Do Templars and mages never speak to each other?
Some do, but Templars are supposed to maintain a certain distance from their charges. If a mage is possessed or uses blood magic, you must act quickly, without hesitation. Your judgment cannot be clouded. Of course, ignoring one another does nothing to foster understanding.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
I'm sure you have other matters to attend.
We need to head to Adamant Fortress as soon as possible. If there's a chance we can stop Corypheus from destroying the Wardens, we can't let it slip away.
What do you think we'll uncover in Adamant?
Nothing good. Hearing the Warden's plan was bad enough. Now we'll see it firsthand. Best case, we find a nightmare. Worst, we'll find a nightmare, then die painfully. I still can't believe what they're doing. I thought I understood the Order.
What do you think of the Inquisition?
I think the entire world is looking over its shoulder, wondering if the Inquisition's watching.
What do you think of my advisors?
Leliana seems nice. Also a little frightening, but mostly nice.
You're not saying that for my benefit, are you? Are you so certain you're being watched?
Are you so certain we aren't? I don't want to wake up with a blade in my kidneys if I can help it.
You must have some feelings about our friends.
Sarah doesn't know who she is or what she wants, and doesn't even care.
What do you think of the Inquisition's cause?
Restoring order is a goal I support wholeheartedly. But that's not the end of it, is it? Not by a half. The Lady Seeker believes we are restoring the Chantry. Others say it needs reform. I don't know where you stand on the matter, and I'll admit I haven't made up my mind either.
We should return to our duties.
As you wish. You are, after all, in charge.
Look at all the stuff that I can't afford. Oh.
I hear you'll be leaving us soon.
They're all dead. I can go home.
Inquisitor.
Where's Varric? Interesting.
We must stop the Wardens from carrying out this insane plan, Inquisitor. To seek out these old gods deliberately in some bizarre attempt to preempt the Blight.
And calling the army of demons. That's my favorite part.
The demons are nothing. They're a tool.
A tool that gives Corypheus an army.
That's not the point. Even if they could succeed, the entire idea is wrong. The Blight is not something one smugly outsmarts. Forgive me. The entire idea is unnerving.
Oh, Solas, you can never be satisfied.
Questions.
I'm curious why you were in Redcliffe in the first place.
Looking up an old mentor of mine. A magister by the name of Alexius. Good fellow. Always thought highly of him. Then one day, he asks me to join the Venatori. I don't know what he was thinking. He knew I wanted to change Tevinter, not regress it into prehistoric madness. The Venatori killed Alexius once he stopped being useful.
Seems odd he would get involved with the Venatori at all.
That's what I thought. I'd hoped to persuade him to leave Redcliffe. I suppose he had his reasons. People will do odd things when they're strung over a barrel. Either that, or I didn't really know Alexius at all.
I'd like to ask you about Tevinter.
Ah, yes. Everyone outside the Imperium always seems quite fascinated by it. Probably why they come up with so many ridiculous tales. Flying cows over Minrathous. That's madness. All right, that one's actually true, but the cows didn't have wings. I digress. Anything in particular you wanted to know?
Corypheus is a figure out of Tevinter history. He was a magister.
Yes, but that was a different time. The Imperium's power was at its peak then. The Civil War had ended. The Magisterium was united, its armies scooping up bits of Thedas like candy. The Magisters who entered the Black City. It was a demonstration of how exceptional Tevinter had become.
But who were they?
No one knows. There's no record of a Magister named Corypheus. All this happened 1400 years ago, before the Blight nearly wiped us out. There are no records. Today, people half believe it's all just a story. That's what I believed.
We have evidence the story is very much real.
But not who Corypheus is. If he even remembers. There used to be families who claimed some of those Magisters as their own. That stopped when the Chantry appeared. Then it was shameful, and the families distanced themselves from the tale. All we know is that some men and women entered the Black City looking for the old gods. What did they find? According to Corypheus, nothing. And only he could tell us more.
Anyone who talks about the Imperium mentions slavery. It's the center of the slave trade.
Ah, that is true.
And did you have slaves?
Not personally, but my family does and treats them well. Honestly, I never thought much about it until I came south. Back home, it's how it is. Slaves are everywhere. You don't question it. I'm not even certain many slaves do.
Well, we don't have slaves in the South.
In the South, you have alienages, slums, both human and elven. The desperate have no way out. Back home, a poor man can sell himself. As a slave, he could have a position of respect, comfort, and could even support a family. Some slaves are treated poorly, it's true. But do you honestly think inescapable poverty is better?
Is that what you call it? Treated poorly?
Abuse heaped upon those without power isn't limited to Tevinter, my friend. I don't know what it's like to be a slave, true. I never thought about it until I saw how different it was here. But I suspect you don't know either. Nor should you believe that every tale of Tevinter excess is the norm.
Just how often is blood magic used there?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all.
That's what any Magister would tell you. They'd be convincingly offended by the notion, too. Of course, what people call blood magic here, and what we consider blood magic, are two different things.
What's considered actual blood magic in Tevinter?
Blood magic isn't inherently dangerous. Using your own blood or that of a willing participant, what's the harm? The problem is that what's permitted only gets you so much power. And what if you need more? You always need more. That's where we get into sacrifices and demon summoning. None of that is done. Not officially. Behind closed doors, it's a different story. Real blood magic can give you an edge, a leg up against your opponents. It's safe to assume that any mage of rank does it. The rest are quietly shut out of power, to put it bluntly.
You'd think the Templars would object.
I imagine they did, long ago. Once, their investigations might have been sincere. Then their balls were cut off. Too inconvenient. Nowadays, only the friendless are accused. And most of them probably innocent.
There must be some mages who oppose this.
Of course. I do. And I'm not entirely alone. Occasionally, there'll be a Magister who makes noise. And then the reform talk begins. All very patriotic. Meanwhile, that Magister will be quietly shunned. Chances are, surprise, it's learned he was a Maleficar all along. Most learn to keep quiet. Me? I enjoy the allure of pariahhood.
It seems strange that an entire empire would be ruled by mages.
I find it strange that your mages don't rule anything at all. Actually, the fiction in the Imperium is that mages don't rule. The Magisterium rules. That Magisters are all mages is considered a convenient technicality.
What is the Magisterium, exactly?
The upper house of the Imperial Senate, and the only part worth having a seat on. Those seats are split among the circles of Magi, the Chantry, and the major families. All mages now. It's odd that outside the Imperium, you use Magister like it applies to every Tevinter mage.
If you're not a Magister, then what are you called? No special title?
I'm an Altus, which is almost as good as a Magister, depending on who you ask.
I've never heard of an Altus.
Upper class. Those families who trace descent from the Dreamers, the first prophets of the old gods. If you're a mage and you're not Altus, then you're later, lower class. If you're not a mage at all, you're Soperati. That's everyone else. We do love our fancy words.
I thought the Archon ruled over the Imperium.
Well, yes. Technically, he can overrule laws passed by the Magisterium, but that never happens. Even so, he gets to appoint new Magisters, which means all the families vie madly for his favor. Thus, the Archon gets invited to all the parties. The truest path to Tevinter influence, let me tell you.
If it's a fiction, that means mages do rule, then.
Yes and no. Let me put it this way. Mages do rule, but not all mages are equal. If you're not from the right family, chances are you don't rule anything. Maybe you're even a slave. The idea that anyone could be a mage, however, keeps the masses placated.
Can anyone be a mage?
Technically. The potential runs mostly in bloodlines, but it's been known to happen. More importantly, commoners believe it can. Tevinter legend is chock full of mage heroes from humble origins. So they hold out hope. Someday my son or my son's son will be a mage. Someday. Poor sods don't realize that means he'll be a quaestor at the arse end of the 100 Pillars, at best.
Being a quaestor isn't a good thing?
I imagine the average non-mage likes to think so. Counting numbers and shuffling papers all day is better than many occupations after all. If you're a second-class citizen among a pack of piranha, however, your outlook changes.
But let me ask you something else.
Of course.
wondering if the Imperium would be a useful ally.
I'd think you'd be more concerned whether or not they'd support the Venatori. They won't. At least, not officially. They'll disavow all knowledge of dangerous cultists. Secretly, many Magisters will rejoice at the idea. And if the South falls to chaos in the meantime, all the better.
It would be in the Imperium's best interest to help. Surely it could use allies.
I think the Imperium gave up on the idea of allies a long time ago. We've been fighting the Qunari for what? 200 years off and on? It's a point of pride that we go it alone. They'll sneer at the South behind their silk handkerchiefs and say, "You've had it easy for far too long." Let's not forget that the Inquisition seems to be an arm of the Orlesian Chantry. Anathema so far as they're concerned.
We're not part of the Chantry. The Chantry opposed the Inquisition's formation.
You think that matters? Don't be silly. The Herald of Andraste. Your very title smacks of the Southern Chantry. You may as well be a heathen. I think they're far more frightened what you'll do if you succeed.
There's an Imperial Chantry, isn't there? With its own divine?
You people aren't supposed to talk about the Black Divine, are you? If you mention him outside the Imperium, people make that face, like you're urinating in public. But yes, we do have the Chantry, or a version of it. Night and day comparing it to yours.
Is the Imperial Chantry so different from ours?
Not in theory. The main difference is in the whole magic is meant to serve man, not rule over his business. Back home, ruling the unwashed masses is serving them, for the good of the Imperium. Perhaps it started with good intentions, but these days it's academic. The circles are in command.
There are circles of magi in the Imperium?
We don't have dismal little mage prisons, if that's what you mean. They're academies, prestigious ones. We have Templars as well, but they don't cancel spells or whatever your Templars do. They're soldiers. They watch for abuse of magic, yes, but only those who are weak or who fall out of favor get dealt with. Mostly they enforce their magisterium's edicts. The Chantry smiles and nods from the sidelines.
Do you really call him the Black Divine?
We don't call him that, oh no. In the Imperium, he's the true divine. The woman sitting on the Sunburst throne is some backwater pretender. It all stems from a disagreement over Andraste. Marvelous, isn't it?
Why would they disagree over Andraste?
It's not my field of expertise, but the Imperium believes Andraste was a mortal woman, a mage. Down south, they say, no, she's the bride of the Maker, ascended to his side, divine provenance, a blah, blah, blah. We feel better believing Andraste was one of us. Makes executing her less damning, you see. So we elected a man as divine, the South declared war, and we've been feuding cousins ever since.
So the Imperial Divine is always a man?
All the better to distinguish him from that other one, yes. Don't think there aren't a number of female magisters who bristle at that. Why can't they be divine after all? Same reason you never see a man on the Sunburst throne. Because that's how it's always been done. Excellent reasoning.
Do you consider yourself Andrastian?
The big question. It might surprise you that I do consider myself Andrastian. I simply do not believe in the Chantry. It is a relic, whether back home or here in the South. Something from a bygone age desperately clinging to relevance. It's not an opinion that makes me popular.
I'm not surprised. It's not an opinion you should share.
You did ask, if you'll recall. I'll say this. I may not believe in the Chantry, but I believe in you.
In me?
That the Maker sent you, whether through Andraste or fate. Cassandra is not wrong. You are what we needed most at the moment we needed it. That's what they will say in ages to come.
You don't seem like the religious sort, to be honest.
If you define religious as sitting in a chantry and listening to a blithering hen tell you how to live, then no. If you define it as believing in the possibility that something larger than yourself exists, then yes, by all means. The world is bigger than I, even bigger than you. It laughs at all the things we think we know. The Maker doesn't need me to believe, but I do. The thought of no one at all watching out for us is too frightening.
Let me ask you something else.
So many questions.
That's all I wanted to know.
Fair enough.
I should go.
You know where I'll be.
Do you need something, my dear?
I'd like to know more about you, Madame Vivienne.
Whatever would you like to know?
Your accent's not Orlesian. Where exactly are you from?
I am from the Circle, my dear. One's country of origin rarely matters there. But if you must know, I was born in Wycombe in the Free Marches. I was sent to the Ostwick Circle, but I transferred to Monsignor while still an apprentice.
I'm curious how a Circle mage winds up at court here.
Nobody winds up at court, my dear. It takes a great deal of effort to arrive there.
I caught the eye of Duke Bastien de Ghislaine, an advantageous connection that opened many doors. When the position of Enchanter to the Imperial Court became vacant, I was able to secure it.
You're married to the Duke de Ghislaine?
Of course not, my dear. Don't be ridiculous. Marriage is the business of alliance and inheritance. I'm Bastien's mistress.
And what does the Duchess de Ghislaine think of this arrangement?
We got along quite well. Duchess Nicoline and I used to host musical salons together. She was a great patron of the arts. She passed away from a fever a few years ago, the poor dear.
What duties does a court enchanter have?
I am tasked with providing assistance to the Empress on arcane matters. Most of my predecessors restricted this to lighting lamps and doing parlor tricks. In such troubled times as these, however, I provide political advice to Her Majesty on the subject of the Mage Rebellion. How may I help you?
I wanted to ask you about the Circle of Magi.
Of course. What do you wish to know?
You must have an opinion of the Templars after living so long in this circle.
Having opinions about Templars, my dear, is exactly like having opinions about mages or Navarrans or men. I have known some who were impossible to endure and some who were utterly charming. I have suffered insults at the hands of those in the armor, but no more than I endured from nobles or tradesmen in Val-Royaux. Personally, I have found the Templars a useful tool, skilled at keeping more unpleasant elements at bay.
If the circle disbanded, how can you still belong to it?
The circle is an idea, my dear, and an idea cannot be dissolved. Many of the first enchanters voted for rebellion, caring little that anything short of a unanimous decision would pit mage against mage. Rather than dissolving it, Grand Enchanter Fiona's vote split the circle in two. The rebels follow her, the loyalists follow me.
If you lead all the loyalists, why are you only First Enchanter and not Grand Enchanter?
Grand Enchanters are elected, and since there are no First Enchanters besides myself, no vote can be held. I could name myself Grand Enchanter, but the title holds no meaning now. When the circles are restored, that will change.
What was it like to live in a circle?
My dear, your question is the root of all problems with mages. I cannot tell you. Every circle was different. Their Templars were different, their politics unique. And every person within each tower had an experience of circle life unique to themselves. Some people suffered and some were content. Some were cruel, some compassionate, and some indifferent. The same is true of people everywhere, in all circumstances, whether they are mages or not.
So, tell me about your personal experience with the circle.
I enjoyed life in the Montsimard Circle, my dear. It was an edifice devoted to knowledge and refinement. And mages need the company of other mages. No one else can truly understand the challenges we face, nor see the world as we do.
You must have been under constant supervision being forced by Templars to live in the tower. Was that hard to endure?
My dear, I have a suite in the palace and a wing at my dear Duke Bastien's estate. I've never been forced to live anywhere. Most circles allowed mages to live away from the tower, either on their own or in service to the nobility. All that was required was permission from the first enchanter. Some circles were harsher in their restrictions. Kirkwall was the worst, but it was the exception. Most were quite permissive, perhaps too permissive in retrospect.
How did we come to this state where the circle's in revolt?
A failure of perspective that infected circle leadership. Mages lived solely in a world of Templars and mages. They could not even imagine what was beyond the tower walls. Kirkwall gave the world a reason to remember its fear of magic. A mage killed hundreds with a snap of their fingers. Across Thedas, a new tangible fear of magic grew. commoners and nobles alike called protection. But the malcontent powers do nothing of this. Themselves and for their own restriction. When a man attempted to assassinate Justinia, the mages resisted the invasion. The leadership independent on the conditions imposed by the Templars, sparing no thought to the fact that magic was more feared in the aftermath of these attacks than it had been since Tevinter's day. So long as they had their freedom, they could care little for riots, angry mobs, or about pitting mages against each other.
Are you familiar with Enchanter Fiona?
We've met. Before horrendously ill vote for independence. Adequate. Being of a year to let us spend time.
Have caused
Aftermath of terrorist attacks? Was that really the most opportune time to break away? By all means, protest abuses by the Templars. Just don't do it in a way that says mages support wholesale murder. By voting when they did, my colleagues all but declared war upon the ordinary people of Thedas. A war in which we are outnumbered 100 to 1.
I thought the fighting was only between mages and Templars. Why are mages fighting mages?
The vote for independence was carried by only a small margin, but Fiona chose to let the motion stand. Those who opposed a rash declaration of war against the entire free world had little choice. By breaking from the Chantry when they did, the rebels declared themselves in support of mass murder. Anyone who did not wish to support terrorism and the slaughter of innocents was forced to take arms against the rebels. Did you need something, darling?
What are your thoughts about the others in the Inquisition?
I admire Cassandra's determination. If she had a little charm, she could be a remarkable leader.
Silveric knew where the champion was all along. That's the last time we sent Cassandra to interrogate.
Anything I should know?
It seems that the Orlesian army is awaiting our next move. Some of the generals are sympathetic to our cause, others are still suspicious. Our actions are under a great deal of scrutiny.
They called you the left hand of the Divine.
That they did? What of it?
What is the point of an Inquisition?
Justinia would have started the Inquisition if the Divine Conclave failed to restore peace. She hoped that with enough support, we could challenge the very tenets of the Chantry. She wanted the Chantry to treat the mages fairly. But sometimes I wonder, why stop at mages? The Chantry has committed many injustices. If we're going to change it, why not change the whole thing? It's just a thought. None of this will be possible if we fail.
I'm sorry she didn't live to see the Inquisition.
So am I.
I could use the left hand of the Divine at my side out there.
Every agent out in the world is my eyes, my ears, my blade. Wherever my people are, I am also. Coming with you, leaving my post, would blind and bound me. Do you see?
What exactly does the left hand of the Divine do?
A divine always has enemies, and Justinia had more than most. I protected her. I watched, had an ear to every door. I identified threats, and I dealt with them.
Why did Justinia have so many enemies?
There were many who felt she was unfit to be divine. She had a past, a worldly life. Unlike many, she wasn't given to the Chantry as a child. She chose it. And somehow that made her unworthy. And because they thought she was unworthy, they wished her harm.
It sounds like you did some unscrupulous things as the left hand.
Perhaps. But wouldn't you do anything to protect what you love?
We'll talk more later.